guys, how's it going? Statman coming back at you once again, and today we're going to be talking about The Jungle Book! The Jungle Book! Say it with me. I know that I have some fans, at least, that are obsessed with The Jungle Book. And yeah, to them, I'm sure they'll be glad that I'm doing this video. For others, I don't know how you're going to feel about it, but yeah, I'm just going to do a little comparison review video of the original Jungle Book animated film from Disney, and then the new remake that they did here for the Jungle Book, because I recently got this, and then I just in the past few months or so got this from Disney Movie Awards as well. So yeah, I figured why not do a little comparison video, because actually I sat down and I watched both of these back to back. I watched this one first so I could have it fresh in my mind, fresh in my memory, before watching this one. I wanted to know where they were coming from with this, what kind of stuff they were doing, because I haven't seen this one in years. So I wanted to know what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and I wanted to have that fresh in my mind when, watching this and deciding whether or not I like it, I keep saying, every video I've got something that it's like, or I just keep saying the same thing over and over and over again. I do apologize for that, but sometimes when you do these videos, that happens. You find a phrase and you latch onto it and you don't even realize you're doing it. But I, who am an anxiety-riddled weirdo, latch onto that stuff immediately, and I'm just like, oh, I hate when I do that. Oh, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. That being said, let's go ahead and talk about some Jungle Book, shall we? I've never been a huge fan of the Jungle Book. I do like this movie. It's a Disney classic. It's a fantastic film. The bare necessities is going to be stuck in my head for at least the next couple of weeks. So, yeah, I can't necessarily say that it's a bad movie. The music is fantastic. The animation is fantastic. The story is pretty good. It's not necessarily my favorite Disney story out there of all the Disney classic movies, but it's fairly good, and I do enjoy it from time to time. That being said, there are a few problems that I have with it. I don't necessarily like that at the end of the movie, or near the end of the movie, they have a young woman singing about her life as she's gathering water and about to return it back home. And basically this song is literally all about how her dream is to grow up and be a housemaker and a wife. And oh my God, it was so fucking sexist. I'm sorry, it really was. I'm not one to really, or I try not to be one to really just like point that shit out all the time and take issue with it all the time and let it ruin movies for me or something. But that scene is just fucking cringe. That music, that song is so cringeworthy. There's a reason that song never became one of the popular songs from this. And it's not because it's not necessarily, like, rhythm-wise a bad song. It's because the lyrics are cringeworthy. They're fucking horrible. The message there is absolutely atrocious. But that's on par for a lot of these early Disney movies. The message there is absolutely atrocious. And this movie didn't really go too deep into the concept from Rudyard Kipling. That's his name, right? Rudyard Kipling. But it did explore a lot of the concepts behind the story, and I was actually surprised to see that they have, as a special feature on here, an alternate ending to The Jungle Book. And it's really just a storyboard of an alternate ending that they had planned. Somebody found a script for an alternate ending to this, a script that never actually made it through, and then they went ahead and got the okay to do like a storyboard adaptation of the end of this alternate ending, and that made it onto the Blu-ray. It's actually a fairly lengthy and much different ending, but it's also a pretty damn interesting one at that. One I would have liked to see actually totally brought to fruition, because it's pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting switch up. It's a pretty interesting turn from what they did originally, where he returns back to the village, even though he proved that he doesn't necessarily belong there. Which, by the way, that's one of my big problems with the movie, is that he basically goes through the method of, like, proving that he belongs in the jungle. He's bound and determined to prove that he belongs in the jungle. He doesn't want to return to the village. He fights it tooth and nail. And eventually they relent. Eventually Bagheera and Baloo relent, and they're just like, okay, you can stay in the jungle, whatever, right? I feel, if I remember correctly, they kind of relent. They're just, okay, you can stay in the jungle. But even though they relent, he ends up getting close to the village, and he sees this little girl, and of course, sexual attraction at a young age fucking pulls him in, and he is drawn to her and drawn to do whatever she wants. It's like she has him under his spell, almost like Ka. I mean, it's really awkward and weird, and it doesn't feel like it fits in with the story, because the whole story is about how he goes through all these trials and tribulations and proves that he belongs in the jungle and he's a part of this jungle, and then he goes back to the village anyways, and that's the end. What? No! No! I think that's one of my main issues with the original Jungle Book, is like, it just, the ending doesn't make sense to me. So the alternate ending I liked because it made a little bit more sense. What they did with the alternate ending was a little bit more interesting. I do like it. I'm glad that I have it, but not my favorite Disney movie. So after determining that much about the movie, I was like, well, boy, I hope they did something good with the new remake or reimagining of the Jungle Book here. And actually they did. I have to say, first and foremost, I liked this movie better than this movie. This movie was better than this movie. I don't know how they did it, but I'm glad they did. I'm very impressed. Tremendously impressed with the new Jungle Book. So good in so many ways, because they took concepts actually from the alternate ending. I think it feels like they did, at least. There are a lot of things that happen in the alternate ending of this movie that don't happen in this movie, but there are also a lot of things that happen in the alternate ending that do happen in this movie. That just, like, there are elements of the alternate ending that happen in this movie, and I don't know if they necessarily drew the inspiration from the alternate ending, but it kind of feels like they did. They also drew inspiration very clearly from other Disney properties. So you've got Baloo trying to get some honey. He's a bear trying to get some honey. That is very much a Winnie the Pooh kind of thing, and he's trying to stockpile the honey. That's Winnie the Pooh. Let's just be freaking honest here. Disney's doing this. Remember Winnie the Pooh? Huh? And they've also got little references here and there to things like The Lion King. There's this moment in the film where there's a stampede, and it looks and feels exactly like what happens in The Lion King. Hey, remember The Lion King? Huh? Yeah, that Disney is winking their asses off in this movie. And I don't necessarily have a problem with it, because they did it kind of respectfully. They didn't necessarily heavy-handedly shove that shit in there and it didn't feel like it had any purpose, right? It did have a purpose. Every single time there was a reason for it to exist in there, and it wasn't like they were trying to recreate the story elements entire from those stories from The Lion King or from Winnie the Pooh or whatever. They were just throwing little nods in there. Just like, remember this moment from this movie? Oh, we're going to put that in this movie. You know, remember this character flaw from this movie? Oh, we're going to put that in this movie. It had nothing to do necessarily with putting all these different memorable characters into one movie, one property, and everything to do with just these slight little, doesn't necessarily affect the story, doesn't necessarily take away from the story in any way, but adds a little bit of nostalgia factor to the film. I love the way they did that. It felt like very respectful and very interesting to see. And another thing I really liked about this is that it was much more action oriented and much more brutal too. This is, of course, a kids movie. It's intended for kids. It's rated G. This movie it's PG, but it feels like it should be rated a little bit more harshly than that almost. Because there is some serious shit that goes down in this movie. At one point I was saying to myself, God, this feels like Game of Thrones, the Jungle Book edition. It really felt like there was some... I mean, there's obviously not like explicit sex in it, which is something that Game of Thrones is known for, but there are some really brutal moments in this film that just like, oh my God, I can't believe that just freaking happened. Holy crap. Is this actually a kid's movie? Yeah, it was really fucking cool to see those and to see that they took a more action-oriented approach. It felt more like, I don't know, a Pirates of the Caribbean approach to something like Jungle Book, which is really cool. That's exactly the approach they needed to take. Because Pirates of the Caribbean, I feel like, was the impetus behind them beginning to do more live action oriented movies based on the properties that they owned. Can you think of a movie that came before the Pirates of the Caribbean movies that was a live action Disney movie based on a Disney property that did well? A live action movie that did well and was in theaters. Can you think? Nothing else. There's nothing else I can think of. That's the impetus. That's the reason that they started doing movies like this. So yeah, I was really happy to see that they continued on with the same kind of approach to like action adventure that they did with Pirates of the Caribbean that made those movies so enjoyable, because those movies felt like adventure serial in some ways. They felt like adventure serials. Really long, elongated adventure serials, but still adventure serials. And they did that same thing with like the Indiana Jones franchise, not Disney in particular, but the filmmakers behind the Indiana Jones series did that same thing. They took that same approach to taking a film serial and making it into a much longer, much more action-oriented movie, of an entire movie, and it played on that nostalgia for that kind of film, and it really worked well. But kind of what they're doing with these movies is they're taking that concept of an action adventure film along the lines of Indiana Jones, or even, dare I say it, the movies I hate the most, The Mummy. I don't hate them the most, but the Mummy series. You know, they're taking that approach of, well, people like these action adventure films, right? They like action adventure films aimed at a general audience, and we want to do a live action version of our stories. Why don't we take that approach with it? They did it with the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Those movies sold like gangbusters, made buku bucks, so they continued with that approach for these films. And this was actually a Jon Favreau film, and it felt like it. It felt like something. Didn't he do Iron Man? Am I just going crazy thinking he did Iron Man? Yeah, he did Iron Man. So the guy behind Iron Man, he knows how to do a good action adventure film. And he did just that with The Jungle Book. This is a fantastic film. I had so much fun watching it. If I had to give it a rating, I would say this is like an 8 out of 10. I was that impressed with it. There are some flaws, there are some issues with it, but it is really freaking good. So if you have the opportunity to see it on Netflix, if you have Netflix, it's on Netflix right now. If you have the opportunity to see it, I highly recommend checking this one out. Definitely worth checking out. And if you like it, then get the Blu-ray, because the Blu-ray is going to be way better experience than the Netflix copy, because there is a lot of action happening in this film, a lot of quick running scenes and stuff like that, and you're just going to miss out on a lot of the detail when you watch it on Netflix, sadly. It's one of those movies like you don't really want to see this on any digital format, because it's going to get macro blocked to hell and back, and you're just going to see a bunch of pixels on screen, because at the quality that they produce for the Everyman on Netflix, they make these digital copies on Netflix small enough that anybody can stream it without too much trouble. So they even make it small enough that somebody who has like a 5 or 10 megabit download can watch these without any problem, which means that the file itself is probably not going to be much bigger than 5 or 10 gigabytes. And usually it's more like 1 to 2 gigabytes. These files, this is a 50 gig disc. The movie itself takes up probably 20-25 gigs. So Yeah, it's a fairly hefty file difference in size. It's a fairly hefty difference, and you can tell the fucking difference in quality when you're watching an action-oriented film like this. When you see those action scenes, suddenly all those details that are gonna just turn into mush, digital mush on your screen when you watch it on Netflix, suddenly you're gonna see them all when you actually watch the Blu-ray. So yes, I highly recommend getting the Blu-ray if you have the opportunity to. But if you don't, at least check it out on Netflix because, damn, this was really freaking good. The only thing I took much issue with, there were some small things here and there, honestly, like the cinematography wasn't always good, but there were a few things here and there, like King Louis being played by Christopher Walken, that was just weird and creepy and eerie and off-putting and at the same time I can kind of understand why. It makes sense within the context of the film. What you're seeing, this King Louis is definitely meant to be a little bit more creepy and scary than the King Louis from this movie. So, you know, it fits in a certain way, but it's also just like, oh God, Christopher Walken is so goddamn creepy in this movie, you know? He's too good. He's too good in this role. And then for some reason, they end up replaying his song, I Want to Be Like You, at the end of the film over the other song that played in the film, which is another thing I should mention. This movie has a lot of fucking music in it, right? Memorable music. There are 2 songs in this entire movie. 2. So it's not about the music. It's more about the action, adventure, and stuff like that. But yeah, I can see why some people would be a little bit disappointed in that. At least it was like the 2 most memorable songs. But yeah, I can see why people would be disappointed. I wasn't really disappointed myself. I didn't care enough about the music to be disappointed in that. But I was disappointed that they didn't go with the bare necessities for the end music, the end credit music. I feel like that would have been a better choice. Either way, very good movie. Much better than I was expecting. A lot of the voice acting was good. Oh, God, I just remembered. One of the things that I took issue with is that we only saw like 1 scene with Ka. There are like 3 or 4 scenes with Ka in this movie, and 1 in this movie. Really? There's just no room for Ka, even though this movie is literally like 40 or 50 minutes longer than the original. There's no room for Ka. Ka, for those who don't remember, is the snake. The hypnotizing snake. I like Ka. Ka's a cool character. Why couldn't they have Ka in the movie more than that? Those 2 reasons. The movie having a really weird Christopher Walken, creepy Christopher Walken King Louis, and then Ka not being in the movie as much as I think they could have put her in there. Those 2 reasons alone are and then the cinematography not always being good. Those 3 reasons alone are the reason that I gave it 8 out of 10 instead of like a 9 out of 10 or something like that. So, yeah, very good movie. There are a few issues, but overall very good, very fun. Loved it. Loved it more than the original Jungle Book. Way fucking better. I can see myself watching this quite a bit in the future, and I'm glad I got it for $10. I do not regret paying that price for this. So good. So yeah, happy about that. And that is that. That's my review. So, anyways, thanks for watching, you guys. Catch you later. Peace.